Oh, it did. Well done. 5.1 overs on it. I don't think that helped. And Violi will tell you it should.
Honourable members, the Speaker. I acknowledge the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples who are the traditional custodians of the Canberra area and pay respects to the elders, past and present, of all Australia's Indigenous peoples. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to vouchsafe thy blessing upon this Parliament. Direct and prosper our deliberations to the advancement of thy glory and the true welfare of the people of Australia. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Before we commence proceedings, I'd like to take a moment to say a few words. I acknowledge members have returned to Canberra under circumstances that are both tragic and deeply confronting. The horrific events of the 14th of December 2025 shook this Parliament and our nation to its very core. To the families, loved ones, community leaders, and to all of those directly affected who are with us today in the galleries today, it is a solemn honour to have you here. I recognise also members of the diplomatic corps joining us today. Your presence in the People's House at such a painful time humbles us and reminds us why we are all here and the responsibility we carry. We stand together in solidarity with Australia's Jewish community. We mourn the 15 innocent lives lost, and we acknowledge those who will carry the weight of grief and trauma for the rest of their lives. May we honour them not only with our words today, but with our actions in the days and years ahead. Give the call to the Leader of the House.
Speaker, I move the motion to suspend standing and sessional orders in relation to the time and order of business for 19 and 20 January 2026 in the terms circulated to honourable members in the chamber.
The question is the motion be agreed to. I'll put the question. Those opinions say aye. Against no. I think the ayes have it. Give the call to the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I move that this House, 1, tenders our nation's heartfelt condolences to the families and loved ones of the 15 innocent people murdered at Bondi Beach on the 14th of December 2025. 2, condemns the atrocity which stole their lives, an act of terrorism deliberately targeted at Australia's Jewish community gathering to celebrate the first night of Hanukkah. 3, unequivocally condemns the evil of anti-Semitism and vows new action to eradicate it. 4, honours the courage, composure and quick action of all the police officers, first responders and healthcare workers whose dedication and skill saved lives. 5, acknowledges the trauma of the men, women and children injured physically and psychologically including those who witnessed the horror. 6. Expresses Australia's deep admiration for the heroes of Bondi, everyday people who showed extraordinary bravery and selflessness, including those wounded and killed saving others. 7. Affirms the fundamental right of every Jewish Australian to live, work, worship and learn in peace and safety, to participate fully and freely in Australian public life, and to gather in communal association unhindered, proud of who they are and proud of the profound contribution their community has made to our nation's success. And 8, stands together in a spirit of national unity, resolved to confront and defeat the worst of hatred and division with the best of the Australian spirit.
As a mark of respect to the victims of the Bondi anti-Semitic terror attack, I ask all present to rise in their places. I thank the House. Give the call to the Honourable the Prime Minister.
Matilda, Edith Brutman, Dan Al-Khayyam, Boris and Sophia Gurman, Alexander Kleitman, Rabbi Yaakov Levitan, Peter Maher, Reuven Morrison, Marika Pugani, Rabbi Eli Schlanger, Adam Smythe, Boris Tettelroyd, Tanya Tretiak, Tibor Whiteson. Mr. Speaker, the minute of silence that we have just observed echoes with those 15 names. 15 innocent people for whom today should be just another Monday morning. Another day in this beautiful country they loved, in the embrace of the family and friends they adored. Another day in busy lives, rich in passion and purpose, defined by hard work and by humour. Another day devoted to others, serving their community, nourishing their faith. Another day of school holidays. Instead, our Parliament comes together in sorrow to offer our nation's condolences to the people who knew and loved them best. We welcome all the family members and dear friends and spiritual leaders joining us here. From the depths of grief, you have summoned remarkable strength. You have given us a glimpse of who your loved ones were, how much they meant, and how brave they proved themselves to be. As Rabbi Ullman put it, the light that each of those souls brought into the world. As we pause in silence to remember them, we recognise that for you, an unbearable silence has fallen. The silence of laughter forever stilled, of footsteps in the hallway that will never come, of a voice that will never be heard again, except in memories held in broken hearts. The silence of futures unlived, the silence of a sorrow beyond words, inflicted by an atrocity beyond comprehension. On the 14th of December 2025, Chabad of Bondi hosted hundreds of Jewish Australians for the first night of Hanukkah. They gathered at that world-famous spot, a beautiful place at the heart of their community. And in coming together to celebrate the Hanukkah message of hope, resilience and victory of light over darkness, they were also reaffirming their identity, proud Jews and proud Australians. From grandparents who had survived the horrors of the Holocaust and made a life and home here in Australia, to children playing in the summer twilight. When the gunshots began, some people in the crowd looked up to the sky to see the fireworks. Others thought it was balloons popping. Then the horrific reality descended. As we join in mourning for the 15 souls whose lives and futures were so cruelly stolen, our hearts also go out to everyone injured and traumatised, people who will always carry scars from what they suffered and saw on that dark night for our nation. We say to all of you who have travelled here today and to those watching at home, on your long road to healing, Australia will be by your side. Mr. Speaker, just as our nation came together 1 week after Bondi to light candles against the darkness, we must continue to raise our voices against the silence. Because while the massacre at Bondi Beach was cruel and senseless, it was not random. Jewish Australians were the target. As we offer our love, sympathy and solidarity to everyone bearing the weight of trauma and loss, we make it clear to every Jewish Australian, you are not alone. All Australians stand with you. Australians were with you at Bondi Beach in those unspeakable minutes of violence and terror. Police officers and first responders running towards danger to save lives, backed by Hatzalah and community health support. Adults shielding children they did not know from bullets. Lifeguards using their boards as stretchers to carry the wounded. Cafe staff giving shelter to people fleeing in fear. And passers-by performing acts of extraordinary bravery. Mr. Speaker, I've asked the Governor-General to create a special honours list so all Australians can nominate these heroes of Bondi for formal recognition. Because the defining and enduring truth of that fateful Sunday is not fear or bloodshed. It is not the cowardly anti-Semitic evil of the terrorists, nor the murderous perversion of Islam they took as inspiration. It is the courage and kindness of people risking their own lives to save others. People I've had the opportunity to meet. Yankee Super, Geffen Bitton, Ahmed Al-Ahmed, Constable Scott Dyson and Probationary Constable Jack Hibbett, and so many, many more. I've had the honour to meet with some of these heroes to express the gratitude and admiration of our whole country. Their bravery is inspiring and it was instinctive. They did not need to know the names of the people they faced gunfire to help. They did not stop to think about faith or nationality. Their bond was more profound than that. Their bravery was an act of shared humanity. And that is the spirit in which Australians have responded every day since. Working around the clock in hospitals across Sydney, donating blood in record numbers, turning that famous foreshore into a sea of beautiful flowers, matching their words of love with deeds of kindness and unity. Mitzvahs. And in that same spirit, honouring the heroes of Bondi also means standing together against that evil that inflicted this devastation, standing together against hatred, standing together against division, and working together to eradicate anti-Semitism, wherever it hides, whatever form it assumes, and whatever weapons it wields, affirming loudly and clearly that Jewish Australians have every right to be proud of who you are, proud to raise and educate your children in your faith, proud to freely participate in the public life of our nation, and proud that you are not just a part of the Australian story, you have helped to write the Australian story. In government and the law, in business, education, the arts, on the battlefield, and in every field of human endeavour. Your faith, resilience, wisdom and compassion enrich our national life. You belong here, you are respected, valued and admired. As Prime Minister, I give you this solemn promise on behalf of every Australian. We will not meet your suffering with silence. We will not leave you in darkness. We will continue to do everything required to ensure your security, uphold your safety and protect and honour your place here with us as Australians. Mr. Speaker, amidst our grief for those killed and injured and our gratitude to those who save lives, I know there is disbelief and there is anger too. How could there not be? A Holocaust survivor was gunned down in a nation that had given him refuge from the worst of humanity. A 10-year-old girl will never have another birthday. Terrorists, inspired by ISIS, murdered our citizens on our soil. In the long days and hard weeks that have followed, so many of us have thought to ourselves and said to each other, this doesn't happen here, not in Australia. It's not the Australian way. Bondi Beach changed that forever. We must face that unforgiving truth and we must learn from it. We must channel our anger into meaningful action to ensure an atrocity such as this can never happen again. And that responsibility starts with me as Australia's 31st Prime Minister. It also belongs to each of us here in this chamber as parliamentarians. And it's a task for all of us as Australians to build social cohesion, to reject division and prejudice in all of its forms. Mr. Speaker, in the great tradition of Jewish Australians serving our nation, Sir Isaac Isaacs was Chief Justice of the High Court and the first Australian-born Governor-General. And it was the member for Isaacs who reminded me of the Jewish concept of tikkun olam, the responsibility to repair the world. A mighty collective task that begins with individual good deeds, mitzvahs, as Rabbi Ullman and Rabbi Mendel have spoken with me about many times over recent weeks. Small acts of kindness and care that add up to a better world. That is central to the Jewish faith. And it is at the heart of our Australian character too, knowing that our strength comes from caring for each other, respecting each other, looking after each other, bringing light into other people's lives, and recognising that kindness is an act of courage, the courage to listen, understand, learn and change. That is how all of us can help repair and strengthen the fabric of our nation, how we heal and move forward in a spirit of national unity where light triumphs over darkness. It is how we honour the heroes of Bondi and how we ensure that the 15 people we remember and honour today are never forgotten. May their memories be a blessing.
Give the call to the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I rise with a heavy heart to speak on behalf of the Opposition, to join with all members of this Parliament in expressing our deepest condolences and sorrow for the 15 innocent lives taken by the horrific terror attack at Bondi Beach on the 14th of December 2025. I acknowledge victim survivors and families in the gallery today. This deadly and deliberate attack on Jews on Australian soil was on the first night of Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights, a night that should have been filled with joy and hope, not darkness and hate. Many never imagined such a horror could take place on our shores, but it did. People who were there told me their stories, covering their children with their bodies, running to safety, screaming and searching for loved ones, while a part of them felt no surprise, just the cold weight of expectation realised. We somehow knew it would come to this, they said. But how? Surely this is something that happens elsewhere, not in Australia, the land of the fair go. The Australia that opened its arms to Jewish parents and grandparents as they fled the horrors of the Holocaust, where Jewish Australians have embodied our core values of service, duty, mateship and humanity. We honour those we lost by answering this question: how did this happen, and how can we make sure it never happens again? 15 precious lives. Boris and Sophia Gurman. Boris, 69, and his wife Sophia, 61, had been married for 34 years. Rabbi Eli Schlanger, 41 years old, a devoted rabbi and chaplain, father of 5. Edith Brutman, 68, a beloved member of the Sydney Jewish community and a woman of great principle. Adam Smythe, 50, a local Bondi resident, a loving husband to his wife Katrina and father of 4 children. Boris Tetleroyd, 68, a gentle soul and a gifted musician. 10-year-old Matilda, whose parents named their firstborn, in their words, with the most Australian name that could ever exist. Marika Pogany, 82, known lovingly as Omi, a mother, grandmother and pillar of her community. Peter Maher, 61, a retired New South Wales Police Detective Sergeant who spent 34 years of his career protecting others. Dan Elkayam, 27, a young man in the prime of his life. Reuven Morrison, 62, businessman, philanthropist and patriarch of his family. Tibor Weitzen, 78, a father, a grandfather and great-grandfather. Alexander Kleitman, an 87-year-old Holocaust survivor who managed to survive the worst tragedy in human history, where 6 million Jews were murdered, but could not survive Australia's anti-Semitism crisis. Rabbi Yaakov Levitan, 39, a deeply committed religious and community leader. Tanya Tretiak, 68, a much-loved member of the Randwick community. Mr. Speaker, I know that no list of qualities or achievements can capture the full lives that were lived, nor the pain now felt by those left behind. In the past weeks, I have attended funerals and memorials. I was with those who sat shiva with families in their deepest grief, and I have held the hands of mothers who lost children, children who lost parents, husbands and wives who lost their beloved partners. Amid the horror of that evening, we also witnessed the very best of the Australian spirit, with selflessness, bravery and love emerging from the darkness. Ordinary people became heroes. Among them was Ahmed Al-Ahmed, a father of 2 who had brought his own family to the beach that evening. Amid the chaos, he acted. Unarmed and alone, he disarmed one of the gunmen, disrupted the killing and gave others precious seconds to escape. It is clear that many Australians are alive today because of what he did. And Boris Gurman, who with his wife Sophia by his side, confronted one of the attackers with his bare hands, holding onto the weapon for several seconds before they were both killed. Reuven Morrison too ran toward the gunfire. He picked up a brick and hurled it at the attacker to try to halt the carnage, drawing fire away from others and saving lives. Gafen Bitton, another bystander, ran toward danger as well and was shot multiple times. He's still recovering from his injuries, and we offer him our gratitude and our prayers. Rabbi Label Lazaroff, visiting from Texas, played a quiet but vital role, helping shepherd dozens of people to safety, tending to those in shock and offering spiritual support amongst the trauma. We also pay tribute to the surf lifesavers and local lifeguards who rushed to the scene even while the attack was ongoing. They used surfboards as makeshift stretchers, tore through their supply of first aid bandages and sheltered around 250 people inside the surf club. Our emergency service personnel, police, paramedics, Doctors, nurses, firefighters all responded with extraordinary professionalism and courage. New South Wales police officers confronted the attackers, shooting one dead and critically wounding the other, ending the massacre and saving lives. Hospitals across Sydney were put on alert, and thanks to the skill of medical teams, many of the wounded survived. We've heard harrowing accounts of first responders performing CPR, of off-duty doctors in the crowd who sprang into action to tend the injured, of bystanders comforting strangers in shock. To all those who helped in those dark moments, we say thank you. The whole country is grateful for your selflessness. This attack showed us the worst of humanity, but in its wake, we have truly seen the best of Australia. Anti-Semitic hate fueled the terrorists on December the 14th, but it came out of the shadows in October 2023. It walked our streets. It marched over our bridges. It took over our landmarks. It camped in university quadrangles. It painted graffiti on our buildings. It firebombed our places of worship. It sent children to school behind locked gates and armed guards. Like a slow, creeping disease, it festered in plain sight. Jewish Australians do not feel safe. And if Jewish Australians do not feel safe, then no Australian feels safe. You warned of this menacing storm, and you said you felt unheard. The Coalition heard you. We must unite as a parliament to confront and defeat this evil. To do so, we must face uncomfortable truths. Radical Islamist extremism caused this. I repeat, radical Islamist extremism caused this. Leaders need to be able to express this clearly, because if you can't name the problem, you can't possibly defeat it. For too long, many in our society, especially in positions of authority, have failed to act decisively. It should not have taken the murder of 15 people for us to open our eyes to the dangers of anti-Semitism in Australia. As leaders, we have a sacred responsibility to protect our citizens from such hate-fuelled violence. We owe it to the memories of those we lost, and more than anything, we owe it to the nation's children who are born without hate in their hearts. Victims' families, eminent Australians, and millions of ordinary Australians called for a Commonwealth Royal Commission. Through anguish and heartache and grief and horror, those calls intensified. Now that the Royal Commission has been established, we must make sure that it's free to do its work independently, without fear, favour or interference. But I say to the families here today, you are owed an apology for how long it took. You should never have had to juggle grieving your lost ones with national advocacy for the Royal Commission you so understandably wanted and deserved. In the days following the attack, something remarkable happened. Across Australia, people of all faiths and backgrounds lit candles and placed them in their windows. In cities and towns far from Bondi, people held prayer vigils and gathered in quiet, shared sorrow. At Bondi Beach itself, a sea of flowers bloomed outside the pavilion where the attack took place. I was there every day for a week. You had to be present to actually feel the grief, the pain, the bewilderment, and yes, the anger. Because there has been anger through the heartache. So many times we heard, I don't want your words, I want something to be done. At funerals and on the streets, I saw strangers weep for someone they never knew and watched volunteers embrace survivors they had only just met. I spoke with a young woman who survived the attack, saving others. She said, I'm not a hero. Any Aussie would have done the same. I sat with a lady in her 70s weeping on a park bench. We had a tough time when we came here as migrants, she said, but nobody wanted to kill us. Mr. Speaker, today this Parliament mourns with the families lost from this lethal act of terror and with those on the long, uncertain road to recovery. We say to them, you are not alone. Your pain is shared by an entire nation. We cannot fully comprehend the depth of your grief, but we will walk beside you in the days and years to come. We will remember your loved ones, not just as victims of a terrible crime, but as vibrant individuals who lived, loved and contributed enormously to our country. In the aftermath of this tragedy, we must strive to ensure that the memories of those 15 beautiful souls truly becomes a blessing that inspires us to build a more cohesive and compassionate Australia, one where we meet this moment of truth and respond with moral courage and moral clarity. There's no better legacy for the future than the message of strength I heard delivered by Rabbi Ullman at Rabbi Schlanger's funeral to the next generation of Jewish Australians. And I echo that message today. Lift your eyes and stand tall. Be brave. Be proud of your Jewish heritage and your Jewish faith. You should never have to hide who you are or what you believe in. We will fight every single day for an Australia where you are loved, valued and safe.
The question is the motion be agreed to give the call to the honourable member for Wentworth.
Bondi Beach was perfect that Sunday. Hot, clear skies, cool waves, people excited for the coming holidays. And around the country, and especially in Wentworth, Jewish Australians were coming together for the start of Hanukkah. Chabad Bondi had celebrated Hanukkah at Bondi Beach for years, a joyous, open celebration of music, face painting, donuts, games and light. I left Bondi Beach with my family just an hour before the horror began. Sunday, December 14, is one of the darkest days in modern Australia. One part of our community, Jewish Australians, were murderously targeted. It was an attack on them and an attack on our Australian values. Our country will never be the same, nor should it be. The question is who we become now, how we honour the memories of the 15 beautiful people we lost, how we honour and care for the dozens who are physically injured and the countless who can never forget the trauma and the bloodshed of the day, and the families who will live with the scars forever. Every person we lost that day was a precious gift to their family and their community. Simple words are inadequate to express their light. But saying the names of those we have lost has a special place in Jewish culture. People are not gone if we continue to say their names and remember them. Rabbi Yossi Friedman tirelessly led the reading of names for 30 days at Bondi Beach, and I'll continue that here. Cherished community member Edith Brutman, adventurous young traveller Dan Echoyam, Boris Gurman and Sophia Gurman, who instinctively and courageously tried to stop this atrocity. Alex Klaitman, who survived the Holocaust but died in the country where he sought refuge. Rabbi Yaakov Levitin, who chose a life of devotion. Former police officer and community stalwart Peter Marr. Reuven Morrison, who lost his life courageously challenging the gunman. Caring grandmother Marika Pogany, who delivered meals to those who need. Rabbi Eli Schlanger, a giver, someone I was lucky enough to know personally and experience his goodness and his warmth. Adam Smythe, a local father, husband and friend. Boris Tettelroyd, a gentle, much-loved man and gifted musician. Daniel Tretiak, who died shielding a child from gunfire. Tibor Whiteson, a great-grandfather who gave out lollipops at Bondi Chabad. And finally, 10-year-old Matilda Britvan, a light. May their memories be a blessing. In the words of the poet Zelda, each of us has a name given by God and given by our parents. As parents, we often name our children for our hopes. The hope for Australia captured in Matilda's name is heartbreaking. How badly we have let down her parents and her family. How badly Australia failed the Jewish community that day. When I think about the terrorists who attacked that Sunday, it's easy to despair. But then I think of the other stories of the day. I think of Boris and Sophia, a couple in their 60s who tried to stop the gunman with their bare hands. Their courage leaves me in awe. Of Reuven, who took on the terrorists only armed with a brick, of Ahmed al-Ahmed, a Syrian refugee who saved many lives by disarming one of the attackers, of Haya, a child herself who put her body in front of other children, of so many who risked their lives to protect, of locals, surf lifesavers and guards, young CSG guards, police, first responders, Hadzola and tireless healthcare workers. Some of those people are in the galleries here today. Thank you, each and every one of you, for what you did when it really mattered. Many recount the long-ago stories of Gallipoli as exemplifying the Australian spirit. I believe the stories of Sunday, the 14th of December, deserve to be cherished equally. That is the modern Australian spirit, one of courage and of care. The care I saw in the quiet procession of thousands of people, locals and people who had travelled for hours, school children, sports teams, people singly and in groups, people of all faiths laying flowers to say, "We are devastated too, you are not alone." The care in the paddle out of thousands, the beach lined by surf lifesavers, strangers hugging, local businesses giving coffee to first responders and flowers to mourners. The tears and stories that we shared at the memorial, our mitzvahs, our kind melting pot Bondi community trying to process the destruction with care for one another. One Jewish woman told me that the light she found in the darkness was that people she had not heard from in decades reached out simply to say, "I am with you." We will not let the terrorists win. Australia promises that your safety and acceptance do not depend on your religion, ethnicity, or who you love. I am proud of that promise, but we must make it real for Jewish Australians who belong here too. There have been Jews in this country since the First Fleet. Their contribution across our institutions and endeavours is boundless. They are our friends, our neighbours and colleagues, yet many of them no longer feel safe or welcome. Security fences and guards around Jewish schools and synagogues are normalised. When I attended the bat mitzvahs of my school friends, we walked straight through the front door. Now, as a local MP, I encounter guards and barriers at almost every Jewish school or synagogue I visit. When I think of how we must change, I look to an Australia where we don't need those guards. We don't know how long it will take, but it violates our Australian compact when a community has to pray, congregate or educate behind security. We must not tolerate it, and we must not tolerate the violent extremism that makes it necessary. Anti-Semitism has become normalised in this country in a way I never thought I would see. A friend of mine being sworn at as a South African Jew when asking someone to inch their car forward. An 8-year-old girl being abused at the lights because she's holding the hand of her Orthodox father. As one mum said to me, "How do I explain to my kids that so many people hate them?" When Jewish Australians tell me they are thinking of leaving this country where they were born, it is a tragedy for all Australians. And as a parliament and as a country, we need to be both strong and soft right now. Strong in confronting the hate that drove the attack, resolute against violent Islamic extremism and all types of violent extremism, clear-eyed and fact-based about what it will take to keep the Jewish community safe, and soft, so that we do not lose our common humanity in our strength. If we meet difference with suspicion rather than with curiosity, the terrorists will truly win. This work belongs to all of us in all our workplaces, universities, schools, home and online spaces. It is not the work of weeks, but of years. And my commitment to the families of Bondi is that I won't move on from this when other people do. Australia is one of the most diverse societies in human history. It is remarkable, but it is not easy. Social cohesion must be consciously built. Each of us, including everyone in this House, must personally reflect on how we contribute to that cohesion, and each of us must do better. We will disagree passionately, but we owe it to one another to disagree well. We must not dehumanise one another. We cannot fight hate with hate. As Rabbi Ullman reminded us on the last night of Hanukkah at the vigil on Bondi Beach, darkness is not defeated by anger or force. Darkness is transformed by light. People are angry now, and rightly so. But in his words, Australia must become a nation where kindness is louder than hate, where decency is stronger than fear. This was the most violent attack of hatred in modern Australia. And I do believe that we as a country can emerge more united, more steadfastly committed to our common values and our shared humanity than ever before. The stories from Bondi show us the way. The courage and the care of those Australians show us the way. This is what we owe those we have lost. This is how we honour their blessed memories. And as Rabbi Ullman reminds us, this work is urgent. Let us not wait for tomorrow. Let us start today. I thank the House.
Call to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Defence.
A day or two after December 14, the remarkable story emerged of a couple in their 60s, Boris and Sophia Gurman. Grainy dash cam footage captured them trying to confront the gunman right at the start as they were getting out of the car. Without any training, Boris, a retired mechanic, Sophia having worked at Australia Post, incredibly, it looks like they will prevail, appearing to disarm one of the gunmen. But then another gun is found, and heartbreakingly, both Boris and Sophia are shot and killed, becoming the first victims of the Bondi massacre. What I find utterly astonishing about their actions is how intentional they were. This was not a reflex. They didn't have to put their lives on the line. In fact, the more obvious path to have walked would in all likelihood have seen them alive on this day. And yet, in that moment, they staked all that they had been, to defend those around them, as did Reuven Morrison, who threw a brick at one of the gunmen until he too lost his life, and Ahmed al-Ahmed, who threw himself at one of the terrorists. In the days after Bondi, I was speaking with Rabbi Marcus Solomon, who could only see the actions of Ahmed al-Ahmed in the context of the literal workings of God, facing two people with a shockingly distorted worldview. Here was this man, Ahmed al-Ahmed, in the name of Islam, a word which means peace, a faith that holds as a tenet that the taking of an innocent life is a terrible sin. Here was a man who risked his own life to protect those around him, irrespective of their religion. And what these four people and others did in that moment was to change the equation in that moment, but for all time. Because whereas the gunmen might have expected to have it all their own way, for it to be a free-for-all, they found themselves instead on contested ground. And we will never know the names of those who were saved as a result, nor how many. But when you consider that there were 1,000 people attending the Chabad community event on that busy summer Sunday evening at Bondi, those who might reasonably say, but for their actions, death may also have become me, must surely be numbered in the hundreds. And so in the middle of this tragedy, their actions stand forth like a shining beacon. Bondi is the moment that terrorism came to our shores, to an iconic landmark of our nation. But the Bondi massacre was a clear and calculated attack on Jewish Australians. It was an horrific act of anti-Semitism, which on the one hand took the life of 87-year-old Alex Kleitman, a survivor of the Holocaust, and on the other, the life of Matilda Britvan, who at the joyful age of 10 was literally distilled potential. So much has been said about anti-Semitism in the last month, in the last 2 years. It may be tempting for some to think that given anti-Semitism has existed for millennia, what on earth can we possibly do? And yet, in the very many conversations that I've had with members of the Jewish community, what they have all consistently said to me is that for many and for most of their lives, anti-Semitism is far from having defined their experience as Jewish Australians. In fact, quite the contrary. In a world in which anti-Semitism exists, Australia had been a safe harbour. And it's really against that backdrop of relative historic normality that the Jewish community today is so shocked and so traumatised that their kids going to Jewish schools have to do so behind high walls and 24/7 guarded protection, that when kids are leaving school they have to get out of their uniform on campus so that they cannot be readily identifiable on the streets, where the logos are taken off school buses for the same reason, and the same way of operating applies to Jewish aged care facilities, to Jewish community centres, to synagogues. And it has become difficult, if not impossible, for the community to celebrate with joy, culture and religion without fear. And so rightly, the Jewish community asks today in Australia, how is that okay? In the land of the fair go, how is that fair? And if there is to be any meaning coming out of this tragic event, it must be in the resolution of this question. The legacy of Bondi has to be that we return to the Jewish community the Australia that they once knew, and in the process, as we aspire to eliminate all forms of prejudice from our country, we seek to provide to each and every citizen the full promise of Australia.
Call to the Leader of the Nationals.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On behalf of the Nationals, it's with great sorrow that I rise to grieve with this Parliament for the 15 Australians that were tragically lost at Bondi Beach in what was a horrifying terrorist attack targeting our nation's Jewish community. Our thoughts remain with all those who are injured, and we offer our gratitude for those acts of incredible bravery that we saw during this moment of terror. The bravery from our first responders and the bravery from those Australians who acted heroically to save the lives of others. We commend the courage from heroes like Ahmed al-Ahmed, who put his life on the line, who disarmed a terrorist and who saved the lives of countless others. But what unfolded last month was a despicable act of anti-Semitic terror. Australia was violated in the most egregious way on that day by pure evil that has left a scar on our nation. Ultimately, it is for us not to let this become a footnote in our history, but instead to have the courage to make it a defining moment as an enduring legacy to those lives lost, to eradicate this type of evil from our country. There has been only 2 times in my life I have seen the fears in the eyes of the people of Western Queensland. The first was the terrorist attacks of 9/11, and the second was on the 14th of December 2025. For many people, not just in Western Queensland but across Australia, we think of Bondi as this iconic, if not mythical, part of Australia that most of us only ever dream of visiting. And for one of this nation's most iconic places to have been assaulted in the most heinous way has shaken our belief in what it is to be Australian and what it is to live in Australia, a nation that until now has been afar from this type of terror. Because as the sun began to set in the early evening of Sunday the 14th of December, the shores of Sydney's Bondi Beach had been throughout that afternoon a scene of bliss and enjoyment. It was Hanukkah by the sea. It was an occasion for the Jewish community and for families, for children and for locals of all ages to come together and light up the famous Bondi beachfront in a celebration of humanity and faith. Horrifically, as the time approached 7 p.m, 2 Islamic terrorists unleashed a barrage of bullets which transformed what had been a scene of peace and grace into a scene of cold-blooded terror. And in the aftermath of this shattering act of evil, today is a meaningful moment for this Parliament to remember and honour all those innocent souls who were cruelly taken away. We honour 10-year-old Matilda, a ray of sunshine who will be remembered by her family as a girl who loved to laugh, dance and sing. We honour the generous souls like Rabbi Eli Schlanger, who was cherished by his community for his graciousness, and his funeral I had the absolute honour of attending. We honour the bravery of Boris and Sophia Gurman, a couple who were both lost while trying to stop the gunman. We honour the boldness of Reuven Morrison, who went down as he confronted the terrorists armed with just a brick. And we honour the sacrifice of those Australians who died while shielding their loved ones from this act of terror. Today we honour each of the 15 Australians who have sadly lost their lives in a sinister and vile terrorist atrocity that should never have happened. Because what unfolded at Bondi is the human toll of anti-Semitism. This is the human toll of inaction with anti-Semitic hatred is allowed to fester. And this is the human toll of Islamic terrorism, a threat fuelled by an extreme religious ideology embedded with violence and intolerance. For 2.5 years, Jewish Australians have warned and pleaded for us to act against this scourge of anti-Semitic hatred that has been allowed to spread, and for that we have failed them. Because when Jewish childcare centres need to be patrolled by armed guards, we have failed them. When Jewish students are intimidated on university campuses, we have failed them. When Jewish businesses were boycotted, we have failed them. And when synagogues were firebombed, we have failed them. This cycle of poisonous anti-Jewish hatred must end. Otherwise, this will all be in vain. Anti-Semitism must be eradicated, and radical Islam must be eradicated. I grew up in an Australia where it didn't matter where you were Catholic, Protestant, Muslim, Jewish or anything in between. So long as you contributed to your community and you contributed to our country, we celebrated the richness of faiths which has made this country, and that's the Australia that we must fight to regain. We are the custodians of the Australia that we inherited, and a society that has drifted into a dark place that we must have the honesty to face up to what it has become, and have the courage to fix it, to hand an Australia to the next generation that we're proud of. Mr. Speaker, today we pay our respects to the lives which were stolen at Bondi. 15 innocent Australians have lost their lives. Our Jewish community has been traumatised and our country reshaped. There are really no words of comfort that I or any of us can provide to the families of these victims that will ease their pain. But they should know that this country is with you and that your loss will not be in vain. May they rest in peace.
Call to the honourable member for Isaacs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too begin by speaking the names of the 15 people who were murdered at Bondi Beach on the 14th of December 2025. Rabbi Eli Schlanger, Rabbi Yaakov Levitan, Alex Kleitman, a Holocaust survivor, Peter Maher, Boris and Sophia Gurman, Edith Brutman, Dan Elkayam, Reuven Morrison, Marika Pogani, Adam Smythe, Boris Tettleroyd, Tanya Tretiak, Tibor Weizen, Matilda, aged 10. There are moments in our nation's history that confront us with unimaginable horror and grief, that leave us searching for words, that leave us struggling to comprehend the scale of what has been lost, that compel us to reflect, to remember and to act, that test not only our laws and our institutions, but also the quiet assumptions of safety decency and mutual care that distinguish Australia's values. The attack at Bondi Beach on the 14th of December 2025 was such a moment. It occurred during a Hanukkah celebration attended by families, children and elders, a gathering that symbolised joy, tradition and community, shattered by hate. 15 people were murdered, many more were wounded, traumatised, and lives were forever changed. Amid the horror, acts of extraordinary courage also emerged, bystanders shielding others from harm, emergency workers and police officers running towards danger, strangers helping strangers. And Ahmed Al-Ahmed, a 43-year-old Syrian-Australian father of two who disarmed one of the attackers, preventing further loss of life. In minutes, a targeted atrocity against Jewish Australians turned a celebration of light into a moment of darkness. Yet even then, humanity's most selfless instincts of mutual care emerged, instincts that hold communities together in their most distressing moments. It was also an attack on the kind of country we strive to be, one that is fair, safe and inclusive. We must not, and we will not, allow those values to be diminished. Every Australian, regardless of their faith or background, deserves to live in safety, dignity and in peace. I've spoken with members of my own community who were, like me, deeply shaken by this attack. Parents unsure how to explain such violence to their children. People of all backgrounds struggling to make sense of such hate and to find the words to speak about it. Our response cannot be confined to grief. It must extend to what we choose to defend and how we defend it. That means upholding our laws against hate. It means ensuring that our public spaces remain open, inclusive and safe for all communities. I'm seeing Australians come together, not only in grief, but in determination. Determination to reject hate and to act with unity and care, the values that unite us as a nation. I've spoken the names of those who were murdered. Each one was a life full of meaning, people who were loved, who contributed to their communities, who shaped the lives of those around them in quiet, lasting and meaningful ways. For every person murdered, there are families and friends left behind, a home left quieter, clothes still hanging in wardrobes, photos on walls that will never be updated, children asking when someone is coming home, a seat left empty at the dinner table, a laugh no longer heard, the longing for one more word, one moment, one more chance to say what was left unsaid. The pain of that absence does not pass quickly. They were parents, children, neighbours and friends. Their loss is not only an overwhelming private sorrow for families and loved ones, but a wound felt across the nation. It's a reminder of how fragile our shared sense of peace and safety can be and how vital it is that we protect it together. There are some that seek to take that from us. We must not let them. You don't have to be Jewish to feel this in your chest. An attack like this hurts all of us. In Jewish tradition, there's a prayer said by mourners. It's a prayer about life, dignity and the hope for peace at times of profound loss. I will close with the mourners' Kaddish in memory of those we've lost, and I'd invite all present to rise. Yitkedal v'yitkedash Shemei Rabbah, ve'alma devira hirutei ve'amlich malchutei b'chaychon uv yomechon uv chayei yichol beit Israel ba'agala uvizman kariv ve'imru. Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'le'alma almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitparar v'yitmoran v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yithalei v'yithalal shemei de kudesha. Birchu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata d'hushpekata v'nechemata da'miran ve'elma ve'irmu. Amen. Yehi shalama Rabba min Shamaya ve'chaim aleinu ve'el kol Israel ve'imru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav. Hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'el kol Israel ve'imru. Amen.
Call to the honourable member for Barara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today we gather to remember the victims, to support the injured, to comfort the mourners and to praise the heroes. And we gather to reflect on the choices before us as a country. As a sixth-generation Jewish Australian, I've always felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for what this country has given my community. Jewish and Australian stories are deeply intertwined. My grandfather Sam served in the Australian Army in World War II. He was taken prisoner on the Thai-Burma Railway. In that terrible place, he drew strength from the freedom of the Australia he loved. Every week, no matter where the Australians held camp, Jewish services were held. Even in the horrors of the Changi prison camp, a place was consecrated as a synagogue. It's why when my first child, my son whom I love, was born, I wrote, "I want James to understand the particular perspective that comes from being a Jewish Australian, a religious minority that has never numbered more than 1% of this country, in a land which almost uniquely in human history has been good to the Jewish people." That same concept was so beautifully encapsulated by the wonderful words of the Deputy Prime Minister earlier today. There's much I grieve for today. The innocents lost at Bondi, the survivors at Bondi and the things they cannot unsee, the synagogues torched, the Jewish artists doxed and frozen out, the university students harassed, the small businesses shut down. All of this pains me. But it is the loss of the truth that Australia is good to Jewish people that crushes me. The loss of this idea is felt by every Jewish Australian, particularly when we see our children confused and scared about what is happening in this country. Bondi alone did not do this, but it has been accelerating in the 800 days between the Hamas attack on Israel and the Bondi attack. 800 days of failure across our national life. The feeling in the Jewish community right now is visceral. It's of disappointment, of anger and of betrayal. The Holocaust survivor Eddie JQ at the end of World War II left Europe for Australia because he couldn't resolve the question, where were my neighbours? Increasingly, Jewish Australians are asking the question, where are our leaders? Today is not about day-to-day politics. It's about the type of country we want and the type of people we are. The sad reality is if we don't change, then Bondi won't have changed anything. Bondi represents a moment of choice. Will we stay in the political cul-de-sac that we've been in for over 800 days, or will we tackle the sources and causes of anti-Semitism in this country? Will our leaders continue to treat anti-Semitism and violence against Jews as a political problem to manage rather than the moral and cultural problem that it is? And will our leaders drag their heels or deal with the issues with priority, alacrity and zealous determination? If we are to change, it starts with tackling the three groups where anti-Semitism has taken hold. The first group where Jew hate is festering is in violent neo-Nazi groups. They move in small cells which must be disbanded. They're best tackled with more funding and stronger powers for our security services. The second group is the radical Islamists. They are a danger to our Australian community and they are a danger to Muslim Australians. In my own community, the Persian community have for years stood against the mullahs of Iran and all their extremism, and I honour them. We must shut down the hate preachers and their extremist prayer halls. We must prescribe Hizb ut-Tahrir. In fact, it should have been done years ago. We must jail and expel the vile propagandists and their violence, and we must be vigilant about those who seek to come to this country. The third group where anti-Semitism is rife is in the cultural left. It's in the writers' festivals that celebrate people who say their mission is to make Jews feel culturally unsafe. It is in the theatres where kafirs are donned and Jews are catcalled. It's in the universities where Jewish students are harassed and Jewish academics are deplatformed. It's in the conferences where Jews are silenced, shut down, humiliated, called mutt, and where the term Zionist is used as an insult. In all these places, we have witnessed a failure of moral leadership. We have seen anti-Semitism excused with the word but. We have seen hatred framed as artistic expression. Mr. Speaker, it would be tempting to conclude with something poetic or sacred, a call, as it were, to give us hope. I can't do that today, but I will finish with a warning. We cannot continue the 800 days of neglect. Bondi will either be the crescendo to a bad chapter in our history or the midpoint to a story that gets worse. Without change, without political change, without cultural change, without a reprioritisation of anti-Semitism as the foundational threat to this country, what we have seen will get worse. It's naive to think Parliament can sit for 2 days and then move on as if that's enough to deal with this issue. If we have to, we need to deal with anti-Semitism every day this Parliament sits to get the job done, until we restore an Australia that is good to the Jewish people and free and fair for all. Our times require leadership and goodwill. If we show it, if we work for it, then we can reclaim the Australia we remember and love, and in so doing provide some comfort for all those who have lost so much. That is the choice before us today.
Give the call to the Assistant Minister for Immigration, Foreign Affairs and Trade and the Honourable Member for Kingsford Smith.
After Michael and Valentina migrated to Australia from Ukraine, they wanted to choose the most Australian name they could for their firstborn child. The name they chose was Matilda. Matilda and her sister Summer were students at La Perouse Public School, where over half of the student population are Indigenous kids from the La Perouse Aboriginal community. That community welcomed and embraced Matilda, Summer and their family. They gave Matilda the name Wuri Wuri, which in the Dharawal language means sunshine. And what a ray of sunshine she was. Matilda was the youngest victim of the senseless anti-Semitic terrorist attack on the Jewish community at Bondi Beach on December 14. I offer sincerest condolences and the love of our community to Michael, Valentina and Summer on the loss of your beautiful Matilda B. The last photo of Matilda is of a happy, smiling 10-year-old dancing amidst the bubbles, face-painted, celebrating the start of school holidays and the first day of Hanukkah with her family on a picture-perfect day on Australia's most iconic beach. It represents the innocence and the tragedy of those who lost their lives that day. That photo of Matilda was taken by Peter Marr, a distinguished retired police detective and legend in the Randwick Rugby Club, who was working capturing photos of the Hubbard Bondi Hanukkah by the sea event before his life was tragically cut short. Marzo was a man of integrity and service who volunteered with the Galloping Greens as a team manager, official and referee for decades. The guard of honour at his funeral from the New South Wales Police and the rugby community stretched the length of Sydney's College Street, a measure of our community's respect and affection for Peter. His wife Virginia and his brothers Greg, David, Andrew and Paul carry not only their grief but the love of the entire Randwick community. We honour the life of Alex Kleitman from Matraville, a devoted husband of Larissa and father to 2 children and 11 grandchildren. Alex survived the Holocaust and the freezing winters in Siberia during World War II before migrating to Australia. It's unimaginable that he died on Bondi Beach, enjoying the afternoon sunshine. He died a hero, shielding his wife from the gunfire. The family's courage in the face of unimaginable grief has moved our entire community. We honour Tanya Tretiak, a beloved wife, mother, grandmother and member of the Randwick community. Her husband Pavel, her children Dennis and Julia and her grandchildren mourn the loss of someone whose strength and kindness shaped generations. We also remember the many others who lost their lives that evening. Rabbi Yaakov Letovin, Tibor Watson, Marika Pogany, who volunteered with Meals on Wheels for over 20 years and whose family I know very well. Dan Echoyam, Edith Brutman, Adam Smythe, Boris Tettelrod and Rabbi Eli Schlanger, a teacher and mentor to many. We also remember and pay tribute to Boris and Sophia Gurman and Reuven Morrison, who bravely attempted to disarm the gunman and whose courage saved lives. They are now Australian heroes. In the darkest moments on that terrible evening, we also witnessed some extraordinary acts of courage. Our first responders, including police, paramedics and emergency medical teams, acted with skill and composure that saved lives. And our surf lifesavers and lifeguards once again proved why they are among the most trusted and respected Australians. Lifeguards Michael Jenkinson and Daniel McLaughlin ran towards the gunfire, treating the wounded and ducking for cover as they moved from patient to patient. Jackson Doolan ran barefoot from Tamarama, carrying a defibrillator and a first aid kit. Rory Davey rescued swimmers caught in the chaos. Many surf lifesavers from Bondi and North Bondi clubs ran into the danger, treating the wounded and shielding them from harm, including Andy Reid, Anna Booth, Brett Patterson, Mason Kemeny, Steve Lanak, Anna Willis and Pete Calhoun, who are here with us today. Surf lifesavers are highly trained and skilled in rescue and resuscitation, but they're not trained to treat gunshot wounds as they were that day. Their selfless actions save lives and we pay tribute to them and we thank them. That afternoon, North Bondi Surf Life Saving Club was celebrating its members' Christmas party. In the aftermath of the shooting, the club became a triage point with club members carrying victims on rescue boards back to the clubhouse for treatment. That evening, instead of sweeping up tinsel, they were hosing down the blood-soaked floor. A week later, I was proud to stand arm in arm on the shore at Bondi with those surf lifesavers and hundreds of others in red and yellow as a tribute to the victims and to symbolise our thanks to those who risked their lives to help. That guard of honour stretched the entire length of Bondi Beach. You are truly great Australians. Hanukkah is a celebration of light over darkness. The oil meant to burn for one day on the re-establishment of the Second Temple gave light for 8 days, a symbol of the resilience of the Jewish people. This motion is not only an expression of grief and remembrance, it's a reaffirmation of unity and hope, a declaration that hatred and terror will never define us, a commitment to comfort and support the families of all the victims and survivors of this shocking anti-Semitic attack, that the wuri-wuri of Matilda and all those lost will shine eternally, and that Jewish Australians will continue to be proud of their faith, their heritage and their culture, and that they will never, ever walk alone.
For the call to the member for Fisher.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. In the 13th century, St. Francis of Assisi said all the darkness in the world can never extinguish the light of a single candle. The act of what happened at Bondi on the 14th of December was an act of profound violence and hatred. It stole innocent lives, shattered families and traumatised a community. It shocked Australians from every corner of our country. I extend my deepest condolences to the families and loved ones of those who were murdered
to our brave first responders, to those who were injured, and to all who continue to live with the consequences of that day. No words spoken in this place can ease the pain of parents who have lost children or families whose lives have been changed forever. But it is right that this Parliament finally pauses, reflects and speaks with one voice in sorrow, respect and solidarity. Bondi is more than a location. It is part of Australia's identity, a place of openness, freedom and community. That such a place became the scene of Australia's worst act of terrorism makes this tragedy all the more confronting for our nation. Mr. Speaker, this attack was not random. It did not occur in isolation, and it did not happen without warning. It came after more than 2 years of escalating, unaddressed anti-Semitism in this country. After repeated concerns raised by Jewish community leaders, security experts and law enforcement professionals. After hatred was allowed to become louder, more visible and more normalised. That context matters, not to politicise grief, but to honour it with honesty, head on. History teaches us a difficult lesson. Anti-Semitism never ends with Jews alone. Shortly after the attack, I reflected on words attributed to Martin Niemöller, words that bear repeating today. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. These words are a confession, not a slogan, and they are a warning about the cost of silence and inaction. Condolence motions are about mourning, but they are also about resolve. They are about saying that the lives lost mattered and that their loss demands more than words. For the families of the victims, sympathy alone is not enough. They deserve answers, they deserve accountability, and they deserve to know that everything possible will be done to prevent such a tragedy from happening again. I want to acknowledge the dignity shown by the families in the face of their unimaginable pain. Their calls for truth and transparency are not partisan, they are human, they are reasonable, and they must be respected. To the Jewish community in Australia, many of whom who are grieving, while also living with fear, and some are here today. You are not alone. You have every right to live openly, to worship freely, and to feel safe in your very own communities. Anti-Semitism is an attack on Jewish Australians, but it's also an attack on Australia and 27 million Australians. It is an attack on our values, our pluralism, and on the idea that people of different backgrounds can live together with mutual respect. We must be unambiguous about that together. Today, this Parliament respectfully remembers the lives of the 15 people ruthlessly, needlessly cut short. Matilda, the youngest, at only 10, Rabbi Ali Schlanger, Boris Tettelroyd, Boris and Sevilla Gurman, Reuven Morrison, Edith Brutman, Marika Pogany, Rabbi Yaakov Levitin, Peter Maher, Tibor Weizen, Alexander Kleitman, Dan Elkiam, Adam Smythe and Tania Tretiak. Mr. Speaker, moments like this test us as a nation. They test whether we are prepared to speak plainly about hatred. whether we are willing to learn from history, and whether we have the moral courage to act before tragedy, not just after it. The victims of the Bondi attack deserved better, their families deserve better, and Australia must do better. That means all of us. As we honour their memory today, let us commit ourselves to vigilance, to honesty, and to the principle that silence in the face of hatred is never neutral. May the memory of those lost at Bondi be a blessing to their families and all 27 million Australians.
The call to the honourable member for McNamara.
Most Australians wouldn't have heard of the Chabad movement before December 14. But the philosophy of the Chabad movement is one that sends missionaries to bring Judaism to Jewish people, to all different corners of the world, to enrich Jewish life and to make it easy to experience Jewish life wherever you are. You may not realise, but there is something beautiful and something completely opposite about Chabad holding an ancient festival celebrating Hanukkah, which is about the oil that was found after the destruction of the temple on one of the most iconic beaches in Australia, synonymous with sunbaking and hanging out with friends. But that is what Chabad does. It brings Judaism to all different corners of the world and it embeds it in the society that is there. And the Jewish community in Sydney is just like all other Chabad communities, rich because of the effort that is put in to make Jewish life beautiful and celebratory, filled with mitzvahs, good deeds, and that's what was going on December 14. And the driving force behind Chabad of Bondi was Rabbi Eli Schlanger, someone who I was privileged to attend his funeral, and who even at his funeral was raised as someone who brought Judaism not just to the community of Bondi, but to prisoners and to people who otherwise would be out of reach. And he did so because he wanted to enrich their lives. And I think taking this moment in this house to just appreciate the beauty of, in Australia, you can have one of the most iconic and modern and beautiful beaches embedded with an ancient tradition filled with people who just wanted to feel a part of their own history and spirituality, and for that to be the target. I remember on the evening of the 14th of December, I was driving home and my phone rang, and it was one of my staff who actually was born in Sydney. And she said that there were shots being fired on Bondi, and we think it's near the Hanukkah celebration. The WhatsApp groups are going crazy. And at that moment, I knew I had to make calls to my colleagues and to the Prime Minister's office. But my first instinct was my daughter, because she was on her way to the Melbourne Hanukkah event. And that's what Jewish life in Australia, unfortunately, has become. Is you think, what about my own family and what are they going to be? Are they going to be safe? Thankfully, my mum hadn't gone yet, but tragically, my community in Sydney suffered the most unimaginable pain. I had the privilege of speaking to Josh and Shana Gutnick, who spoke of Shana's incredible father, Reuven. And in our conversations, we spoke about the bravery of Reuven. And one of the things that stuck with me, and forgive me for sharing our private conversations, but one of the things that stuck with me that I think is worth mentioning is that Reuven, Josh and Shana were imagining what his thoughts may have been in that moment when he decided to confront the terrorists. And the answer that they gave was, how dare they? Now, how dare they come to our community? How dare they come to my community? And what a brave and incredible person to pick up whatever they could to try and protect their community. Because for Jewish Australians, this country means so much. For my family, this country means so much. For our community, this country means everything. It has been a safe haven for our community and a safe haven for our people who fled persecution and dehumanisation. And I tried to think about what must have been going through the gunman's head when they're looking down upon the community, seeing innocent people. Now, what are they looking at? What do they think of us? What do they think of me? What do people think of the Jewish people here in Australia? Well, I am proud of my community, and our community are a proud people. We belong here, and we must not dehumanise one another. As my beautiful new daughter, forgive me, she'll calm down hopefully. We must not change my train of thought here. I think that will happen over the next few months. We must not dehumanise each other, because dehumanisation is what leads to exactly what happened in Bondi. Not every act of hate ends in violence, but every act of violence begins with hate. And I say to my colleagues here in this place that Jewish life was absolutely shattered in Bondi. People have questioned their place in this country. But the way we honour the incredible victims of the Bondi massacre and the Bondi terrorist attack is not just by honouring the incredible bravery and the selflessness and the proud nature of people celebrating an ancient religious tradition on a modern, iconic part of this country, but also to ensure that the everyday Jewish life of Australians and the everyday life of people in our community is not one where you have to walk past security guards and where you have to worry about, are your family safe, just going about your business and celebrating their culture, but actually, can we live in this life and live in this country in the safe haven it was promised? I want to finish by saying that there will be a lot of work to be done, but today is really about recognising those people who were Australians and who paid the ultimate sacrifice, who paid the ultimate price just for participating in Jewish life in Australia. They were targeted because they were Jewish, and history for too long has taken people because of that exact reason. But how a country responds defines a country. When synagogues were burnt down, Australia decided that we're going to rebuild them, and that is the appropriate thing to do. When people were attacked, we need to create stronger laws to ensure that that is the appropriate response to that sort of hate and vilification. But right now we also have a group of people who are desperate to be stood by and to have Australians stand with them. And so to every single Australian who has lit a candle or checked in on a Jewish community member, a friend, a colleague, I say thank you, because how a country responds matters. To all of the victims and to my community, this is our home, this is our country, but to the families, I wish you a long life, and to the victims, Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be a blessing. Thank you.
The call to the Honourable, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and can I say from the outset to the member for McNamara, you need not apologise for the beautiful sound from your child. I think it's a sombre reminder to all of us that we are here for a condolence motion, but indeed an obligation to the next generation. And so thank you for having your little one in the Parliament with us. Mr Speaker, I also express my deepest sorrow for the loss of 15 innocent lives resulting from an act of mindless terrorism on Bondi Beach on the 14th of December 2025. I speak today with a heart that is heavy and also with a profound sense of responsibility as a member of this, our national parliament. Because when violence strikes at the heart of any one of our communities, our nation's social fabric frays. In attacking innocent Jewish Australians, the terrorists attacked all of us. For when Jewish people are unsafe, we are all unsafe. First and foremost, I honour the 15 innocent victims. They were parents, children, friends and neighbours. Each life taken was precious. Each mattered. And the absence of each is being felt deeply by those who loved them and by the nation that grieves for them. To the families of the loved ones, I extend my sincere condolences. I cannot pretend to understand your pain. To the extraordinary bravery of first responders and ordinary citizens who ran towards danger, I thank you. Your actions reflect the best of Australia: courage without hesitation, compassion without calculation, and service without any expectation of recognition. In the days and weeks since, Australians have gathered across faiths, cultures and communities. Candles have been lit, hugs given, tears shed, prayers said and hands held. These simple acts show that hatred and terror do not have the final word. Love and solidarity do. We have heard the voices of moral clarity, especially from religious leaders, including Jewish leaders, who have signalled a desire to respond to hatred and terror with unity and dignity. Rabbi Oshi Goodman, from my area of the Sunshine Coast, said to me, and I quote, "Moments like this remind us of the importance of moral grounding and spiritual depth in our society. And when our values are anchored in something higher than ourselves, including responsibility before God and conscience, it strengthens our capacity for compassion, respect and choosing life." In this Parliament, through the actions we take, the laws we pass, the inquiries we run, it is imperative that we consider Bondi not as some unexpected, out-of-the-blue tragedy, but the consequence of something far deeper and more sinister that has been allowed to fester and become normalised in Australian culture, and that is anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is a cultural cancer, and the strategy we adopt to try and remove that cancer, the actions, the laws, the inquiries, are important, but there is a lesson of history that we must not forget. Culture always trumps strategy. And there is only one thing that can trump culture, one thing that can change it, and that one thing is leadership. Protecting our nation and countering hatred and extremism demands not an episodic burst of energy, but sustained leadership. And our nation is screaming out for it. And providing this leadership is our responsibility as people elected to this, our national parliament. As political leaders, let us speak openly and honestly about the scourge of anti-Semitism, the evils of neo-Nazism and radical Islamic extremists. Let us state unequivocally that there is no place in Australia for religious hatred or for political or ideological violence of any kind. Let us actively look for answers, to search for ways to ensure this sort of atrocity does not happen again, and to defend and promote that one thing that has the capacity to unite us, especially as an increasingly diversified people, and that is a common set of values, values shaped by Judeo-Christian ethical traditions, values of freedom, equality and a fair go, a belief that with rights come commensurate responsibilities, and where we have differences they are met with tolerance. These values, right now, are being tested, and yet they have been the moral foundations of our civic culture that have influenced our institutions, our law and social norms. As they are under threat today, as bore out by the Bondi tragedy, we owe it not just to the victims and their loved ones, but to Australia as a whole, especially the next generation, to ensure these values are defended and promoted so they once again can form the moral foundation of civil life in our country.
Call to the member for Macarthur.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Boris Gurman, Sophia Gurman, Edith Brutman, Rabbi Eli Schlanger, Boris Tettelroyd, Marika Pagorni, Adam Smith, Matilda, Dan Elkheim, Peter Maher, Tibor Watzman, Reuven Morrison, Alexander Kleitman, Rabbi Yaakov Levitan, Tanya Tretiak. To the victims of Bondi, may your memories be a blessing. To your friends and relatives, I wish you a long life. What happened on the 14th of December at Bondi was a tragedy. It was a tragedy for those involved. It was a tragedy for the Jewish community in Australia. The Jewish community in Australia is diverse. It's been here since first European settlement. Many of my relatives came here as convicts. And they built a life that was aimed at service, that was aimed at improving the community, at making the world a better place. And they have done so for generations. The people that were murdered at Bondi were murdered not just by men who were anti-Semitic, they were anti-civilisation. These people need to be rooted out, no matter where they came from. And it's not just Muslim extremism. We have extreme right-wing neo-Nazis who want to do the same, and they must be rooted out. And that's part of our responsibility as a government. And I apologise deeply to the people who were killed and who were injured, that we couldn't, as a country, we couldn't protect you. And it makes me deeply sad. The Jewish community in Sydney had clustered at Bondi for many generations. My dad went to school at Christian Brothers, Waverley, just up the road. He lived in Birrell Street, Bondi. My mother and father met at a party on Bondi Beach, the first time they met. My grandfather, Randolph Griffiths, was one of the Bondi lifesavers involved on the Black Sunday rescue on the 6th of February 1938, the greatest surf rescue that's ever happened in Australia, where hundreds of people were rescued. Unfortunately, 5 people died. He later went on to become one of the founders of the Emmanuel Synagogue in Moolara. The Jewish community has contributed to this country over many generations. It's diverse. The Chabad community is a religious community, part of the Jewish community that has contributed significantly in the relatively short time it's existed here in Sydney. The Jewish community contributes. And there is a huge difficulty with understanding what's happened with anti-Semitism in the last few years. Why has this happened? It hasn't been built on nothing. Anti-Semitism has existed in Australia since Jewish people have been here. I remember as a younger person the firebombing of the Bankstown Synagogue when I was a kid. So anti-Semitism has existed for a long time. It is important that we find out why this has ramped up, and it is important that we root it out. Because, as I said, this is not just anti-Semitism. This is anti-civilisation. There's not a person in this place I know who would not support measures to make sure we root out anti-Semitism in our community. Because it's not just about the Jewish population, it's about all civilised people. And we have to make change. We cannot continue on this road. I congratulate the Prime Minister and the Cabinet for their behaviour and the way they have dealt with this. And I'm very proud to be part of a government that has dealt with this tragedy and is looking to further measures to make sure we don't have further episodes of anti-Semitism to this violent extent in Australia. But it's important we reach into the depths of our society and look as to why this has happened. We need to improve our civics education. We need to make sure that all communities are included in our society and none are excluded. I've been gratified, actually, by the contact I've had with people of all religions from our local Buddhists, to our local mosques, to people of all religions working in the health system with me. And I look forward to a better future. We've seen at Bondi that great tragedy can be followed by great heroism. And as a society, great disasters can follow great light and great improvement. And this is what Hanukkah is about, light into darkness. I thank all those who've delivered messages of hope and positivity. We must look forward, not backwards, but we must make sure this cannot happen again. Thank you.
The call to the Manager of Opposition Business.
The most important responsibility of any nation, state and its government is the safety and protection of its own citizens. In a rights-respecting democracy in a Western country like Australia, the whole purpose of government is to administer the law and have the exclusive monopoly on the right to use force to protect law-abiding citizens. And yet in the Australia of 2026, we now know that the government and all its agencies have been unable to provide some of our most vulnerable citizens, Jewish Australians, to provide them with their birthright of essential safety, of life, liberty and their pursuit of happiness. And we must be open about this. 15 of our bright, law-abiding, peaceful and rights-respecting citizens lie dead, shot on our beach at Bondi. And we, the Parliament, we, the government and we, the people, owe their memory and our Jewish Australian community everything we can do to restore their basic safety. This irrational ancient prejudice of anti-Semitism has made its way to our shores. This enemy is not external now, this ancient prejudice, this enemy walks amongst us. And Mr. Speaker, we must do something about it. Today we can also remember the 10 Australians who died in the 9/11 attacks, the 88 Australians murdered in the Bali bombings, the 2 people killed at the Link Cafe, the police civilian officer gunned down in my hometown on the steps of Parramatta, more incidents than I can remember on our streets, and now 15 beautiful and peaceful Australians slaughtered at Bondi Beach, practising their own culture, traditions and religion, citizens that should have been able to do so in safety. Australia and its people have been under attack by a radicalised and perverted form of Islam since 9/11, a threat that affects all of us and again must be taken most seriously. When a 10-year-old girl, Matilda, named after one of our most iconic Australian cultural odes, is gunned down weeks after receiving an award for her excellent citizenship to others, every Australian parent does and should feel it in their bones that something is inherently wrong and dangerous in our midst. Jewish Australians have done so much for this nation. Names like Monash, Isaacs, Lowy, Gonski, Finkel, Solomon Lew, Triggerboff, Pratt, Geraldine Brooks, Harry Seidler, Jessica Fox, Tora Bright, Jemima Montag, so many proud men and women who've made an indelible contribution to our Australian way of life. These are Australians like any other and deserve their basic rights. Islamic State and its ideology is an enemy of humanity. It kills Muslims, it kills Jews, it kills Christians, it kills Yazidis, and indeed more Muslims killed by Islamic State than any other group. Can we truly comprehend the evil that could overcome a person to look down the sights of a high-powered rifle and fire it at a 10-year-old child? What can we do against such reckless hate? Well, we can fight it and work to eradicate it from our society, to not be reticent with those that reject our rights-respecting society. We cannot be naive about this and this ancient hatred and prejudice. We must understand and believe people that when they say things on the steps of our own opera house, this is what they mean. We must take the necessary steps to apply the law to them, to protect the law-abiding from this criminal behaviour. As Josh Frydenberg said at Bondi on 17 December last year, the massacre of Bondi is the greatest stain on our nation. It has brought the greatest shame to our nation. The greatest stain on our nation must occasion the greatest effort by us, by our Parliament and by our governments to right the wrongs of the past by taking the action that we must to eliminate the scourge of anti-Semitism. Speaker, there are Nazis parading on the streets of Sydney and Melbourne openly. When I was a young man, I was returning home to my home in Parramatta. I'd grown up there, I'd been to public schools there, but I had never known that there was a synagogue just down the road on Victoria Road from where I had lived. On that night, I witnessed 2 figures throw a lit object into a nondescript building, and I rang the police as any law-abiding citizen would, as I watched the fire start and the perpetrators run away. The police didn't know, as I didn't know, that this was the Parramatta Synagogue. That was my introduction to anti-Semitism as a young person in Australia. For most of us in Australia, security and safety is our birthright. Today, for Jewish Australians, it is not. When I returned to that same Parramatta Synagogue 25 years later from that incident, but just a few weeks ago, their community is only there because of the armed guards, because of the fences, because of the cameras. They do not enjoy the birthright that we do as Australians. We should be ashamed and we must be ashamed. But, Speaker, we must act on this shame so the tragedy of Bondi never happens to any Australian again, and that every Australian enjoys their birthright of freedom, safety and security.
The question is the motion be agreed to. Give the call to the Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. On a hot Sunday afternoon, someone living a couple of kilometres from my place had a call from his friend and said, let's go to the beach. And it's a fair way to the beach from my part of Sydney, and so they weren't sure which one to go to, and their option was to go to either Brighton or Bondi. And they tossed it up, and Ahmed said, haven't been to Bondi for ages, let's go there. And they went there for a coffee. First coffee shop said, no, we're closing down, about to shut shop. Second coffee shop, same story. Third, same story. So he noticed that there was something going on in the park. And as he walked across the road, a rabbi issued the most beautiful Australian invitation. He said, yes, this is a Hanukkah celebration that we're having here, but you are welcome to join us. That's why Ahmed al-Ahmed was there. He was invited by the rabbi to be part of the celebration of Hanukkah. He walked around the different stalls, he enjoyed himself a bit, he still couldn't find the coffee that he wanted, and he started to walk off into the car park, and then the shots were fired. A lot is said about faith, and there's been some different lines dropped in different speeches so far. I simply say this: no one is going to tell me that Ahmed al-Ahmed was the same religion as the gunman. He was there on the invitation of a rabbi, and then the moment the Jewish people of Bondi were under threat, he did not care about his own safety. He went forward in the line of fire, and we know what followed. When I visited him in hospital, his explanation of what he did was very much about the hand of God, a story that you could have heard from somebody of almost any faith. And I just think it's important, as we work through the horror and the hatred and the evil, the unspeakable evil of those gunmen, we need to not lose what's best about Australia, and we don't assign it on the way through to the wrong people. I was asleep. My wife and I were celebrating our anniversary. The phone rang. It was the secretary of my department to say that gunshots were being fired in Bondi. We didn't yet know the cause, but there was a Jewish celebration, and we thought it might be connected. Thanks to some quick conversations with Qantas, Sky and I were able to get on the next plane home. And first opportunity, both the police commissioner and Rabbi Zalman Kastel were good enough to join me laying wreaths at Bondi when I was back in the country. The days that have followed have very often involved a man who will not be known to many members of Parliament here, but who is in the public gallery, Rabbi Mendel Kastel. Rabbi Mendel I first came into contact with after the horrific anti-Semitism comments that came out of Bankstown Hospital. I reached out to him straight away for how do we, we'd done the condemnation, the response had happened immediately, but to talk through how we could provide better safety for Jewish patients. I wish it hadn't been that started the relationship, or the 14th of December that deepened it. But Mendel has been a pathway through to any family that has needed help. And effectively, in a moment like this, to make sure that people weren't having to deal with government, that they could deal with a trusted friend, Mendel has very much been the pathway, and I want to acknowledge that. In fact, only weeks before, the kosher pantry had been established at St Vincent's Hospital, not realising the extent to which it was going to be so immediately needed. The message from those who hate is to tell people that they don't belong. The message from Australia needs to be that we are all here together. We need to respond to hatred with the ferocity of laws that are carefully targeted. And I must say, in terms of hate speech, I wish we were going harder than we're able to go tomorrow, but we deal with the parliament we have. And I acknowledge the member for Wentworth, who's also been arguing on hate speech laws for a very long time. But there is no greater signal, and I just want the parliament to know, there is no greater response to people being told they don't belong than for Australia to respond to people and say, you are welcome here forever. Dan's partner, Crystal, made contact with Senator Duniam and said, I want to stay in your beautiful country, but she had applied for a spouse visa, a partner visa, and no longer had a partner. She's now a permanent resident of Australia. Rabbi Yaakov Levitin's parents didn't realise that they were going to be asked to come from South Africa to be constantly helping with the grandchildren they thought they'd only visit. They're now permanent residents of Australia. And Geffen Bitton, who joined Ahmed al-Ahmed, who rushed to the exact same scene. He had only been awake for a day when Rabbi Mendel made sure that I was there to conduct the ceremony. Is a very weird one. We have to cancel someone's visa, put them in detention, and that gives me the right to give them whatever visa I want, to give them permanent residence, which people smile in different ways. Crystal joked as to whether she would have to be put in handcuffs. Geffen, who'd only been awake for a day, had the slightest smile about it. The Levitins, for everything they were going through, still insisted on putting berries on the table as a sign of hospitality, as though they had to offer more. But in this moment, Australia has a chance to respond more loudly than the evil of the terrorists, and to simply say, they don't speak for us. Our voice is, you are welcome here forever. We will make it safe.
Call to the member for Mallee.
Thank you, Speaker. It's with profound sorrow that I rise today to speak about the horrific events of December 15th at Bondi Beach and acknowledge the grieving family members who have been in this House. Bondi Beach is an iconic Australian landmark that should symbolise joy, freedom and unity. Instead, it became the scene of unimaginable tragedy. 15 innocent lives were stolen by Islamic extremists driven by hatred and intent on inflicting maximum harm. This was not just an attack on Jews. It was an attack on every Australian and our way of life. It was the worst terrorist atrocity in Australia's history, and it has shaken every one of us to the core. What happened that day is utterly unthinkable. Families gathered to celebrate Hanukkah, a festival of light and hope, were gunned down in cold blood. Children, parents, grandparents, all targeted simply because of who they are, Jewish Australians. We watched in horror as the news unfolded, moving from disbelief to grief and then to haunting questions. How could this happen here? Why such hatred? Who could commit such evil? This is not Australia. This is not the nation I grew up in and that we cherish. Since October the 7th, 2023, anti-Semitism has surged alarmingly across our country, we have seen Jewish Australians harassed, threatened and vilified, homes graffitied, cars and synagogues firebombed, and businesses coerced into closure. Synagogues and schools and childcare centres have been forced to tighten security as fear grips their community. Our fellow Australians, our neighbours, our friends now feel like strangers in their own home. It is disgraceful, it is unacceptable, and it must stop. Equally disturbing are the scenes of aggressive mobs in our streets celebrating violence, chanting hatred. This is not free speech. This is incitement. It corrodes the very fabric of our society. When any group is targeted, whether for their faith, ethnicity or identity, it is an attack on all Australians. We cannot and must not stand by, because the standard we walk by is the standard we accept. Islamic extremism must stop. Neo-Nazism must stop. Anti-Semitism must be eradicated. We owe it to every Australian to ensure that our country is a place of safety, acceptance and peace. To every Jewish Australian and to every family shattered by the Bondi Beach attack, I extend my deepest condolences. Your grief is our grief. Your fear is our fear. Australia is your home. You belong here. You deserve to live free from terror, free from hatred, and free from fear. Speaker, as Australians, we are bound together by our shared humanity and our commitment to justice. Let us say with one voice, never again, not here, not anywhere.
The question is the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the Attorney-General.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On the 14th of December, Jewish Australians from across Sydney gathered at Bondi Beach to commemorate the first day of Hanukkah. And what should have been a joyous celebration of the victory of light over darkness was instead forever tarnished by a targeted act of pure anti-Semitic evil. What occurred that day is an unfathomable tragedy that took the lives of 15 innocent Australians, including young Matilda, only 10 years old. Let me be clear, there was nothing random about this act of violence. This was an act of terror by individuals with hate in their hearts and guns in their hands. I extend my deepest condolences to all who innocently lost their lives, to the families, loved ones, and all those in our community who have been affected by this terrible devastation. Together, we stand together in this place as Australians united in grief, but also committed to ensuring that the atrocity that occurred in Bondi against our fellow Australians can never happen again. As a nation, we must respond with strength, not partisanship. This is what Jewish Australians deserve and is an outcome that I'm focused on ensuring we deliver. Because an attack on Jewish Australians is an attack on all Australians. In the aftermath of the attack, I had the solemn honour of standing beside Jewish Australians, fellow parliamentarians and the Governor-General at a commemoration organised by Jewish women's groups at Bondi Pavilion to pay my respects and mark 7 days since that terrible event. Together, we joined in remembrance of those who lost their lives as a sign of collective unity and the need for action. It was the strongest reminder that at times of extreme hardship and tragedy, we see the best of the Australian character. And in the days and weeks following the attack, Australians from all walks of life have rallied to support victims, their families, and the wider Bondi community. It has been nothing short of extraordinary. People placed flowers at Bondi Pavilion, checked in on their Jewish friends, supported local businesses, and acted as a shoulder to lean on when it mattered most. As a representative of one of the country's fastest growing and most diverse regions, it was particularly heartening to see the display of solidarity and outpouring of support from so many different religious and cultural leaders in northwest Sydney, and I'm sure right around Australia. It is this demonstration of strength and solidarity that we must also emulate across this parliament. We must work not only to respond to this awful event, but to foster a society in which this very hatred has no opportunity to grow. In this place, we represent every corner of our nation. We represent families who want to go about their lives in peace and different communities that contribute so richly to our national fabric. We represent those who live in the best country on earth, a place where people should not be forced to live in fear because of who they are. So as we bow our heads and say, never again, we must find ways in which to honour the victims and deliver for Australia not only with our words but with our actions. May the memories of those lost live on, and may we find the strength and courage in this time of grief to do just that.
The question is the motion be agreed to, and I give the call to the Honourable Member for Latrobe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise today to speak on the condolence motion. One of the saddest aspects of being a Member of Parliament here is speaking this awful tragedy at Bondi, a place, as nearly every Australian, if you ask them what's the most significant places in Australia, if it's not MCG, Opera House, it would be Bondi. Everyone's been there. Can I start by actually putting my hat on as a former police officer? I just really want to acknowledge those first responders. Probationary Constable Jack Hibbert, who was just 4 months into the job, who was shot in the head and also the shoulder, losing vision in one eye. And then we have Constable Dyson, who suffered 2 gunshot wounds, which put him in induced coma and underwent multiple surgeries. And I've been asked the question, why didn't they just shoot the offenders? And the simple reason, as I've explained to people, they have pistols and they're up against terrorists who've been planning this for, it sounds like, months, if not years, who have rifles and much superior weapons. So the 2 constables in particular charging up to the offenders or the terrorists were just simply putting their lives on the line. Again, we have Detective Constable Caesar Barraza, another hero police officer. We saw the footage of him taking that, can I say, a miracle shot to shoot a revolver with any accuracy over 20 metres, but he did it, I think it was 40 or 50 metres, and then the father to Ahmed Al-Ahmad disarming one of the terrorists, and that's what they are. They should be not referred to as gunmen, but terrorists, and was shot 5 times. And all those community heroes and for all the amazing work they did. And those who should not be forgotten: Edith Bruntman, 68, Vice President Bunnathbrith, New South Wales Anti-Prejudice and Anti-Discrimination Committee; Dan Eckelman, 27, a French national, played for Rockdale Linden Football Club and worked in Sydney as an IT analyst; Boris, 69, and Sophie Gorman, 61, 2 everyday Australians who amazingly tried to disarm those terrorists as they arrived before they went on to their massacre. Yukov Levin, 39, a rabbi who was Secretary of Sydney Beth Din; Peter Mangat, 61, retired police detective, Randwick, and who was hired as a freelance photographer on the day; Reuben Morris, 62, a businessman who actually threw rocks or bricks at the gunman, knowing most likely he wouldn't survive; Elias Soldier, 41, assistant rabbi, and as we've heard, assisting those in corrective services; Adam Smythe, 50, a Bondi local taking his wife for a walk; Boris, 68, a visitor Hanukkah event that day; Tanya Tringat, 68, Randwick resident attending the event with the family; Timbor Wisman, 78, an engineer who died with his wife Edith Brutman; and Marika